Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin the funeral service. We ask if you have a cell phone or pager, if you could turn it to the silent mode. Officiating is Rabbi Moshe Soloveichik.
Shilamalos Esai Nayel Harim Mayin Yovo Ezri mi Madinoyos Shemayim Varetz Al Yitain Lamot Relecha Al Yonum Shomrecha Hine Lo Yonum Velo Yishon Shomer Yisrael Anoy Shomrecha Anoy Tzil Chayad Minecha Yoma Shemesh Lo Yakecha V'Yarech Balayla Anoy Yishmorcha Mikol Ra Yishmor Navshecha Adonai Yishmor Eseischa Voecha Me'at Hoviyad Olam. In giving the hesped, the eulogy for Moshe, I want to mention a certain thought that I heard from my father many years ago. The pasuk in Bereshis, in Genesis, says, "Vayivra Elokim es ha'adam b'tzalmo." God created man in his image. B'tzelem Elokim bara oso. In the image of God, he was created. And it seems to be redundant. On one hand, the verse says that God created man in his image. And then it says, in the image of God, he was created. And my father said, Vayivra Elokim es ha'adam b'tzalmo. God created man in his image is not with a capital H. It's with a small h. Each person has a different mission in life. Each person has a task, and he is responsible only for his task and not for somebody else's task. But I think even more important than that, each person, his mission can only be fulfilled by him and cannot be fulfilled by anybody else. And I think that when we think about Moshe and we evaluate his life after a person dies, we look back at the person's life, and when we evaluate the life, each person becomes our teacher. Every person is a teacher to everybody else because each person has a different mission in life. And part of that mission is teaching everybody else about life. And when I think back about Moshe Zvolner, I try to remember how I first met him. And if I recall correctly, he had a friend, Sheldon. And Sheldon used to come to participate in the services in our synagogue. And Sheldon and Moshe used to always walk together. We would walk down the streets of Hollywood Park and of Albany Park. And they were good friends. Now, Moshe had a very, very devoted family. But a person needs a friend besides the members of his family. Moshe, with his brother, his brother would be always there to check in on him. He would talk about his cousins. He would talk about going to their houses for Pesach, for the Seder. But everybody needs an additional friend. O chavrusa, o mesusa. Our sages tell us either a friend or death, because life without a friend can be comparable to death. And when Sheldon tragically died at a young age, we were very concerned about Moshe. Where is he going to have that friend? And then what we came to see, as Moshe would come to the synagogue, he would be in the synagogue before anybody else. And if I could say, perhaps more than anybody else, he was the friend of everyone that was in the synagogue, and everybody in the synagogue was his friend. And there were times, sometimes it happens that somebody says something in a synagogue that people get insulted, and that Moshe never got insulted. He never reacted, even when another person would have reacted. He had this trait that none of us had. He had this friendship, this respect for everybody that was there. And I was reminded, the Torah tells us that in the Mikdash, in the temple of old, so in the temple of old, there were two angelic figures next to the ark. And according to our sages, when the Jewish people were doing the will of God, the two angelic figures faced each other. But when the Jewish people were not doing the will of God, so the two angelic figures showed the back to each other and faced the walls of the temple. And there are two approaches to a temple, two approaches to a synagogue, two approaches to a community organization. Some come to see the building, to be in the building, and some come to be together with the people. And Moshe, we talk about a house of worship, but there's a difference between a house of worship and a home of worship. And it depends on the individuals that were there. Sometimes it's a house of worship. Everybody is awed. But there's some feeling and emotion lacking between the people. There might be trepidation, there might be fear, there might be respect. But the feelings between one individual and another is lacking. And Moshe, in a sense, was like the cement. Everybody was friendly with him. He had that feeling. He turned our synagogue from a house of worship to a home of worship. Now, Moshe did not have the ability to daven. He would say Kaddish. He was very careful about saying Kaddish on his parents' yard site. Some in the shul would help him with saying it. But there's a very interesting thought expressed about a certain Hasidic teacher, a certain Hasidic rabbi. He said the founder of the Hasidic movement was the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov emphasized the importance of the common man. Not just the scholars, not just the leaders, but the everyday person. And people would try to imitate, not just follow what the Baal Shem Tov said, but the way the Baal Shem Tov acted. And they say that the Baal Shem Tov would go every day into the woods and sing a prayer of praise to God. And the next generation, they forgot the words. So they would go to that site, but the tune they remembered. They would go to that site and just sing the tune. And then the next generation was not able to say the tune either, but they would go to the site. Moshe had certain limitations. He wasn't able to daven, saying all the words of the davening, the prayers. He wasn't, in a sense, he did not have the ability to say the tune, although the tune is expressive of feelings and emotions. The external tune he didn't have, but the internal tune he did have. But you see, the third generation, they wanted to identify with the Baal Shem Tov. They couldn't say the words. They didn't remember the words. They couldn't say the tune. They didn't know the tune. But they knew where the Baal Shem Tov went to feel close to God. So they would go to that site also. When I think about Moshe, that's what I think. He didn't know the words. He didn't know the external tune. But he knew the place. And that shows a certain desire. Going to that place was indicative of the fact, first of all, a certain closeness to God. The synagogue, the shul, is a house of God. It's a temple in miniature. But I think even more than that, for him, it was feeling part of the Jewish people. He was there together. He was there together with his community, with his people. He was friendly. And the two angelic figures in the temple were symbolic of doing the will of God when they faced each other. Why is it that way? Because we have a special relationship with God when we're part of the community, when we're part of the nation. And Moshe, with all the limitations that he was part of the community, emotional, not the leaders of the community that you'll see their names in print, but he was the cement, so to say, that created a friendship. He turned our synagogue from a house into a home. And the lesson, I think, that we could learn from Moshe's life is that, first of all, we have to do everything we can. In whatever synagogue we go to, whatever house of worship we go to, it shouldn't be just a house of worship. It has to be a home where people are like a family, where people have a special relationship. A second lesson we can learn is how he never insulted anybody. He was very careful in the honor that he gave everybody. And I think that would be the greatest memorial that we can make for Moshe, by following in his path and by learning from the lessons of his life. And he taught us that perhaps better than the greatest teachers of the generation. I'll call on Rabbi Eisenbach to say the Kel Mole. Everybody, please stand. What? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. No one told me. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Well, pardon me, I don't see very well, so I'm going to be holding this, plus I get nervous speaking, so I'm going to be holding this up pretty close. I'm Larry Noodleman, one of Michael's first cousins. I'm going to start by relating an interaction with Michael that had a literally unimaginably great impact on the entire family. When I was 25, my mother, may she rest in peace, my sister, Shalva Myers, and I were at dinner with the Zvolners. Before the meal was served, Michael and I were talking. He asked me, "Should I get married?" I said, "Well, Michael, you know, it isn't just your decision. You have to meet a woman, you have to like her, she has to like you. And before I could go on, he said, I met someone. I said, wow, that's great. And he said, but she's Polish. I said, so she's Polish. What does that have to do with anything? He responded, well, we're Jewish. I said, you're not Jewish. You never go to temple. He repeated, we're Jewish. Daddy, are we Jewish? And my uncle from another room answered, yeah, we're Jewish. After the dinner, I looked up in the word Jewish in the dictionary and discovered that if your mother is Jewish, then you're Jewish. Michael was responsible for Shalva's and my finding out that we are Jewish. My sister has 7 children and more than 30 grandchildren, some of whom are already married. All of them are observant Jews, Liayin Hara. I am married to Barbara Belsky, and we raised 2 now adult children as observant Jews. Shalva and I are forever grateful to Michael for this gift. In more recent years, Michael loved the Jewish holidays. My sister would have the Zvolners at Pesach and Sukkot, and Barbara and I would have them at Hanukkah. Michael always looked forward to these celebrations and would frequently ask about them, usually about the menu. I have another thing to talk about. Michael was a good son and a loving sibling. It was clear to my sister, her kids, my wife, and our kids that he loved his brother and sister and all of us as well. Another thing about Michael exemplifies my comment about his being a good son. The Zvolner family never had a car until Stephen bought one for himself as an independent adult. For as long as his parents lived, Michael went to the store several blocks away every week, often more than once, to do the shopping. I remember my childhood and my rebellion against my mother's occasional request that I go to the store for something. He went time and again and eagerly. The only thing he altered from his mother's list was that he sometimes bought more bread and more ice cream, both of which he was more than happy to consume himself. Finally, Michael was a smoker nearly all of his life. Yet he didn't complain, but just complied with all of our requests that he smoke outside, even in disagreeable weather. And one day, about 2 years ago, Michael stopped smoking and never smoked again. This without medication assistance. That's willpower. Michael Zvolner was much more than he appeared. He will be sorely missed. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Rabbi, for your beautiful words. Normally, I was a teacher, so I normally would lecture to my students, but I, just as a, I think for this special occasion, just in case, I have my notes here. It's fairly brief. But Michael's birthday was yesterday. We would have celebrated.
There's a rabbinic statement that the righteous die on their birthday.
Oh, really?
Complete life.
So last weekend, I was with my brother and sister. They both live at the Truly in Evanston. It's assisted living facility. And I was talking to Michael at dinner time. We all know he has a good appetite, healthy appetite, very healthy appetite. You especially know, Rabbi. And Barbara and Shalva. So Michael was saying, well, I want to go to Manny's, And I said, well, Michael, right now you're in a wheelchair, so it might be a little difficult, to get around. But I'll go to Kaufman's. I'll get, corned beef sandwich, pastrami, and with chopped liver. That's an option. And Michael said, and I want extra meat. So I said, of course, we'll get that. So everything seemed so normal, and then the next day, I get a call from the Truly, Evanston, the nurse, late afternoon, I don't know, it was 3:30 or thereabouts, that Michael was, I'm not sure she knew he had a cardiac arrest, but, that he was unresponsive, and they were going to, call the paramedics and everything. But I just wanted to relay about the that his birthday was yesterday and would have been celebrated. And so that obviously makes it so much more difficult, for me. And my sister would have been here today, but now she's in Evanston Hospital for supposed UTI, or, so I mean, that's, but on the other hand, as I was telling my cousin Shalva last night, that, my sister uses a walker, assisted walking device, and she's always afraid, that she's going to fall and everything. And, then my sister's always afraid that she's going to fall. And of course, with the cemetery and with the rain last night, in a way, it's a godsend, as I told Shalva when I spoke to her last night. I said, we don't have to worry about that. Susan's in good hands. She's not going to fall, So anyhow, talking about Michael, and this kind of amplifies or reinforces what Rabbi said. Michael was a gentle soul. He liked people. He was a real people person, and those, he liked to. He had simple interest. He liked to listen, to the radio station, to the oldies stations, the 60s and 70s and 80s music. He had, I don't know, Larry, if you remember, Michael had an extensive LP record collection, the 60s and 70s. He must have had thousands of records, it took up one whole wall of the bedroom. So he liked to listen to the ball game, the Cubs and the Bears and all that. So, and then just a word about the medical team at Evanston Hospital. Michael was in the ICU for about a week before he passed. He was on a ventilator, but the labs, the EEG and the MRI basically showed massive brain injury. But I just wanted to acknowledge, and I told all the doctors and the medical people at the ICU, they were all extraordinary. I mean, they just, it's, but they did everything they could, and but I just wanted to acknowledge them. So, in closing, I'll just say, what I think is the sentiment here is that, we all miss Michael, but now he's with my parents, and he's in God's hands. So thank you. Thank you.
Will you please rise for the Kermole? To rise for the Kermole. Whoever can, if you cannot, it's okay to sit. אלה מולי רחמים, שוכם במרומים, המצי מנוחה נכונות תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות, קדושים ותיירים, כזרוע רקיע, מדבירין את נשמת משה מנשה בן חיים שלח לו למוי, בעבור שאנחנו מתפללים בעד כל נשמתוי, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתוי, לכן בעלו רחמים יצרהו בסתר כנפו לעולמים, ויצחו בצרור החיים את נשמתוי, אדוני ונחלתוי, וינוע בשלום המשכבוי, ונאמר אמן.
This includes the service here at the chapel. The interment will take place at Ridgelawn Cemetery. For those who will be driving in the cemetery, we'll be lining up in a parking lot. We ask that you have your headlights and hazard lights on while in procession and drive as close as safety permits to the vehicle in front of you. At the conclusion of the interment, the family will be sitting shiva at Stephen Zvolner residence, 488 Sheridan Road, Apartment 1, where they'll be there until 8 p.m. tonight, and then tomorrow night at the Truly from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Please remain standing as we escort the casket from the chapel. Just follow behind it.